What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel. And I am back with yet another album review, and today I am talking about a debut full-length from Scottish death metal upstarts Rancid Cadaver with Mortality Denied. This also came out on March 21st, this time on Cavernous/Iron Fortress Records, but also released independently digitally. And like I said, this is the band's debut full-length. They had 2 EPs prior. Never heard of this band before, but I saw the bands they were compared to, Cannibal Corpse and Undeath, and I thought, okay, I might be up for some like groovy, blasty, thrashy, old-school death metal. Well, partially correct. I would say there's a lot more to it than just that. After you get through like the opening track, From Beyond, which was just this intro with horror samples and ambience, then it goes into the title track, and I gotta admit the guitar tone kind of reminded me a little bit of Undeath, but also like Cruciamentum. It's gritty, it's raw, it's murky, but musically this track, it definitely goes for some Cannibal Corpse moments, like the blasts and the tremolos definitely made me think of Cannibal Corpse. Even in the grooves, like this album as a whole grooves pretty big time. And then there's some like D-beat stomps that just kind of adds a little bit of like a bit of a punky flair, honestly, to the songs. In fact, there's a good amount of punk-laden death metal going on here. Kind of like the later, like mid to late 90s Autopsy, or maybe Abscess. And then slurping the cerebral slime after you get through samples, you get into this like lead but grimy doom riff that made me think of Autopsy, but also to a degree Incantation a little bit. I would say it's more towards Incantation than Autopsy, but again, it gets back to being punky. There's tremolos and blast to kind of keep that old school death metal feel going. And then even some triplet chugs, which triplet chugs don't really show up hardly at all, apart from one other track. Zombified kind of starts off whimsical before you suddenly get into this big, giant, squealy dive bomb and doomy riff on top. And for the most part, the leads, just the big, giant Slayer, squealy dive bombs. Only a couple of tracks actually has a pretty decent solo, like ironically enough, Zombified and Gravespawn. Both of those songs have more proper solos than just the big dive bombs, but literally most of the other songs, whenever there's a lead, it's the squealy dive bomb, which did get annoying after a little while. But with Zombified, after that opener, it gets into like some double time briefly before it goes back to feeling really punky and the D beats. But you do still, once again, tremolos, groove, but there's also some like these weird chaotic guitar like dive bombs going on before you get into the lead, and it actually harmonizes and trades off a little bit. So this is probably the most dynamic lead on the entire album, which is really only 2 proper leads. Noxious Expungent. Mostly this is a big lumbering groove track, like it just slows down to like almost like a Gatecreeper pace, but you still once again get some D beats, but some sinister melodies get peppered in. Gravespawn starts off with this like trade-off of sinister riffs and sinister tremolo before it gets into this like punky polka beat, which pretty much shows up on Mass of Gore and the eponymous song Rancid Cadaver at the end. Like these punky polka beats. But there's some groove, blast beats, even a breakdown, which not a whole lot of breakdowns on this album. Mass of Gore, big chugs, groove, sinister guitar progressions before it goes back to those like punky beats. It's one of the more darker tracks on the album, but you once again blasts and tremolos, and it does finally get a little bit thrashy towards the end. Drained of Brains, galloping rhythms at the beginning, but then it turns doomy, like Incantation and Autopsy again, but you still do get some like Incantation blasts and tremolos, and then the song Rancid Cadaver starts off with a clean melody before it just lumbers along with the groove and the riff to just once again add a little bit of like pace themselves a little bit before it gets into more of those punky beats, but tremolos on top. There's another triplet chug that pops up, even some atonal guitars, which is really the only time on the album I would say that there's any atonal guitar work. But yeah, for the most part, when it came to the production, it was raw, it's murky, it's nasty. But I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of the production on this album, particularly the drums. Like the snare, especially in the faster sections and the blast beats, the snare gets buried. So yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan of the snare sound. And then musically, you know, I got tired of the big squealy dive bombs like 3 songs in. I would have loved to have heard more of those dynamic solos like on Zombified and Gravespawn, but it was just all about those Slayer dive bombs. And on top of that, I would have loved to have heard less of the punky, groovy stuff and a little bit faster, like thrashy or just insane death metal. But again, this is just personal preference. It's nothing against this band at all. They're a young band just finding their way. So overall, there really wasn't a whole lot that stood out to me about this album, so I'm gonna give this a 2.5 out of 5. It's an okay album. I definitely think this band has a ton of potential. Perhaps on their next full length, maybe they'll improve upon everything and come out really swinging, and I think they will. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.